Did you believe that medieval history was dull? Reconsider. It featured public sexual inspections, enchanted love potions crafted from blood, and monks riding enormous phalluses as if they were horses. And that is merely the first chapter. This era was not termed the Dark Ages due to a lack of sexual activity, rather, it was because people engaged in activities that would make only fans appear akin to a convent bake sale. Are you prepared to uncover the most outrageous and heavily censored truths in Western history? Excellent, for once you learn this, your perception of the Middle Ages will be forever altered. Therefore, prepare yourself as we delve into the 8 most shocking, disturbing, and outright amusing sexual customs from medieval times that will render contemporary dating applications akin to church picnics. Let us commence with something lighthearted. A dating ritual that entailed being sewn into a sack by your parents. Yes, sewn in sex. The most peculiar first date in history. Picture yourself at 17 years old during the Middle Ages. You have finally reached the age to date. Congratulations. However, there is one stipulation. Your parents will be observing while you are sewn into a sack with your romantic interest. This was not a form of punishment, it was a method of courtship. Welcome to the strange custom of bundling. In numerous rural regions of Europe, particularly in Wales, Ireland, and Puritan New England, it was customary for young unmarried couples to become acquainted by sharing a bed overnight. Sounds somewhat charming, does it not? Well, not quite. The two lovers would lie next to each other, fully clothed, occasionally separated by a wooden plank, and at times not. In more conservative households, they would be literally sewn into distinct sleeping bags made of heavy fabric to restrict their movement. No, I am not joking. Some families stitched the lovers into the sheets. Why, you ask? To foster emotional bonding without physical contact, spoiler alert. It was not always effective. There are accounts of infants being born 9 months after these seemingly innocent sleepovers, along with accounts of enraged fathers storming into the bedroom wielding a knife and a Bible the following morning. However, the situation becomes even stranger. In some areas, parents would remain in the same room, supervising the couple as if they were participants in a bizarre chaperone reality show. Occasionally, they would even wager on the couple's behavior. Let's take a moment to consider this. Can you envision a modern equivalent? Enter Tinder. Yet, every match comes with burlap restraints, a wooden chastity wall, and an audience consisting of your mother and father. Indeed, the dating customs of the medieval era make ghosting appear merciful. We have just departed from the comically awkward realm of medieval courtship. Now, we are venturing into something even more outrageous. A scenario where your bedroom performance could literally be subjected to legal scrutiny. 2. The erectal courtroom. Trials by boner were indeed a reality. Think your most tumultuous breakup was chaotic? Imagine being summoned to a medieval court because your wife claims your penis is dysfunctional, and the judge demands evidence. Welcome to one of the most ludicrous and intrusive legal practices in medieval Europe, the impotence trial. Here's how it functioned. During the Catholic Middle Ages, obtaining a divorce was nearly impossible. The Church was vehemently opposed to it. However, there existed one loophole. If one could demonstrate that the marriage had never been consummated, meaning no sexual relations had occurred, one could have it annulled, which meant that a man's virility could become a matter of legal concern. Therefore, if a woman asserted, "My husband cannot perform," the court might indeed initiate a formal inquiry into his ability to achieve an erection. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Well, it becomes even more outrageous. Some trials necessitated complete physical examinations conducted by midwives and physicians. These unfortunate men would be undressed, examined, prodded, and measured, all in the name of justice. However, the most astonishing aspect is that there are documented instances, particularly in 16th century France and Italy, where men were compelled to showcase their sexual prowess before a court. We are referring to live demonstrations, occasionally involving their wives, and at other times, court-appointed aides. In 1657, one man allegedly succeeded in these tests, only to succumb to a heart attack in the courtroom moments later. It remained uncertain whether his demise indicated his innocence or merely contributed to the spectacle. And here lies the twist that underscores the gravity of the situation. These were not clandestine activities. They were integrated into the official judicial framework, endorsed by the Church. The very institution that advocated for abstinence was orchestrating medieval sexual tribunals. Allow that to resonate. Can you even fathom such a scenario in contemporary society? Your Honor, I object, yet my client is entirely functional, and we possess the evidence to substantiate it. Indeed. Suddenly, being ignored does not appear so severe, does it? It is time to escalate the chaos further. We have already explored awkward bundling and literal trials by erection. Now, let us delve into one of the most taboo and shocking aspects of medieval existence. The clandestine sexual lives of nuns. 3. Holy Sisters Gone Wild. The nuns who operated covert sex rings. When envisioning a medieval nun, one might picture a serene woman in a black habit, gently holding a rosary, leading a life of solemn prayer and chastity. However, dismiss all that. For behind the cloister walls, certain convents were less about spiritual purity and more akin to an underground brothel masquerading as a place of worship. Let us discuss one of the most outrageous scandals in ecclesiastical history. The little convent of the Sacred Flame. It sounds tranquil, does it not? Yet, it was subjected to a raid by the Church after rumors circulated that the nuns were clandestinely inviting men at night, charging for sexual services, and hosting what can only be characterized as holy orgies. No, this is not a fabricated internet myth. It is grounded in numerous ecclesiastical trial records from 15th century France, Germany, and Italy. Moreover, this was not merely an isolated rogue faction. Comparable incidents emerged throughout Europe. However, the situation becomes even more astonishing. Certain convents transformed into refuges for unwed noblewomen who were sent there to evade scandal. Yet, rather than engaging in quiet prayer, many seized the chance to explore the sexual freedoms they were denied outside. They composed erotic poetry. They fashioned dildos from wood and ivory. In one instance, nuns were found to have maintained secret passageways that permitted men to enter and exit undetected. Here's the surprising twist. One notorious abbess, essentially the head nun, was apprehended for orchestrating a full-fledged sex operation involving her entire convent staff. When questioned by church authorities, she responded, "We are wed to Christ, but he does not object to our acquaintance with his creations." Bold, irreverent, and distinctly medieval. Let's be honest. If HBO were to produce a series about this, viewers would likely claim it is too far-fetched, yet that is precisely what renders it so extraordinary. These were not merely a few bad apples. This represented a concealed subculture within the Church, quietly thriving behind closed doors. In other words, while the veil may have concealed their heads, it certainly did not obscure everything else. Let's continue this exploration of madness. We have discussed bundled sacks, boner trials, and nunorgies. Now, it is time to delve into one of the most peculiar, astonishing facts you will ever encounter regarding the Church and sexuality. Because if you believed medieval religion was overly modest, you are unprepared for what comes next. 4. Holy relics of genitals. The saints' private parts that were venerated. Now, prepare yourself as we are about to enter full shock mode. You are familiar with holy relics, correct? Saints' bones, fragments of the true cross, perhaps a vial of tears or a strand of hair. Quite standard in terms of medieval mysticism. But what if I told you that some individuals, devout and pious, were praying to the foreskin of Jesus? Yes, you heard that correctly, not a metaphor, nor a mistranslation. The sacred prepuce, also known as the foreskin of Christ, was among the most sought-after relics throughout medieval Europe. At least 18 churches across the continent claimed to possess it. 18, allegedly, Christ underwent circumcision. Subsequently, his foreskin acquired a miraculous existence of its own. One legend even suggested that it ascended to heaven and transformed into the ring utilized in the wedding of the Virgin Mary. I assure you, I am not fabricating this. However, the situation becomes even more bizarre. Some pious women, including nuns from the medieval period, reportedly had visions of the holy foreskin entering their mouths akin to a communion wafer. One nun recounted that she experienced a sweet sensation on her tongue, reminiscent of honey and rose water. This was deemed a divine encounter. Rather than suppressing it, the Church chose to document these experiences. If you believe this was merely an isolated fetish, reconsider. Other sacred genitalia were also exhibited. The testicles of certain saints were allegedly preserved in jars of wine. Additionally, penis-shaped relics were paraded through towns during feast days, all in the pursuit of fertility blessings. Envision entering a medieval church and encountering a gold-plated, jewel-encrusted well, you know what, on the altar. Strangely, people were not appalled. They expressed gratitude because, in a world plagued by famine, disease, and infertility, individuals would pray to virtually anything that might assist them in conceiving, even if it involved kissing a severed Saint Dong. Indeed, the next time someone asserts that individuals in the medieval era were sexually repressed, kindly remind them that worship of sacred phalluses occurred in the very same places where Mass was conducted. Louise explored the calamities of medieval dating, nun brothels, courtroom erections, and sacred foreskins. Now, let us delve into the bizarre beliefs they held regarding sex. Medieval science was not merely incorrect, it was absurdly and comically misguided. 5. Sex myths so ludicrous they render flat earthers appear intelligent. Picture this: your health instructor advises, refrain from masturbation for now. It will cause your blood to boil, your brain to melt, and summon demons. This encapsulated the understanding of sexuality during the Middle Ages. To begin with, medieval scholars posited that semen was hot, literally boiling hot, and derived from refined blood. Thus, each time a man ejaculated, he was depleting his life force. If he engaged in this act too frequently, he risked withering away, descending into madness, or even facing death. A medical text from the 13th century cautioned men against having sexual relations more than once a week, lest they suffer from dry eyes, dizziness, and trembling limbs. As for women, the situation was even more dire. Physicians believed that women possessed wandering wombs. If a woman lacked sufficient sexual activity, her uterus would become restless and float throughout her body, leading to hysteria, seizures, or worse. The remedy? Sex, or at the very least, therapeutic stimulation. Indeed, some medieval doctors prescribed orgasms as a treatment for women experiencing anxiety, depression, or what was termed melancholy of the womb. Consider that for a moment. A priest might denounce you for lustful thoughts, yet a physician might suggest, engage in more orgasms, it is beneficial for your spleen. Furthermore, there existed the sperm soul theory, where certain scholars contended that each drop of semen harbored tiny, fully formed humans, complete with limbs and a soul. Technically speaking, every ejaculation could be considered a form of mini-genocide. No pressure, gentlemen. Moreover, heaven forbid a woman experiences an orgasm before her male partner. One guide suggested that if she were to climax first, the resulting child might be born with animalistic traits such as scales or fur, as the woman's fervor had tainted the seed. This is not a joke. They were actually attributing dragon-like offspring to premature female orgasms. However, the reality is that these were not merely fringe beliefs. They were taught in academic institutions, preached in religious establishments, and even codified into law. Therefore, if you ever find yourself feeling embarrassed about contemporary sexual matters, just remember that at least no one is suggesting that your uterus might ascend into your lungs due to not going on a second date. Oh, you are still present, courageous individual. Because now we are delving into a realm so repulsive, so astonishingly bizarre that it renders oysters and chocolate-covered strawberries as mere child's play. Let us discuss medieval aphrodisiacs. And believe me, you are not prepared for this. 6. Medieval aphrodisiacs were essentially acts of cannibalism. Indeed, it is true. In today's world, if you wish to enhance your romantic encounters, you might take a little Viagra, light some candles, or perhaps search online for tips on how to engage in dirty talk without sounding robotic. However, in the Middle Ages, they adopted an entirely different method for igniting desire. And by different, I mean utterly insane. Let us begin with this astonishing fact. One of the most sought-after aphrodisiacs in 14th-century Europe was a concoction made from dried human blood. Yes, actual blood. Typically obtained from executed criminals. The belief was that the life essence of the deceased could rekindle passion in the living. Quite romantic, isn't it? But hold on, it becomes even more disturbing. Some recipes recommended combining human fat or crushed bones with wine or honey and administering it to your partner without their knowledge. Thus, if you were to attend a medieval dinner date, you might find yourself consuming something reminiscent of a horror film. All in the name of love. Furthermore, let us not even begin to discuss mamia. This was a powdered substance derived from ground Egyptian mummies. Real corpses were excavated from tombs, pulverized, and sold in jars as a miraculous remedy and aphrodisiac. Indeed, European lovers were literally inhaling ancient pharaohs to enhance their arousal. And here is the most astonishing twist. This was not merely fringe alchemy. Royalty engaged in this practice. Physicians endorsed it. Clergy utilized it. Even King Francis of France was said to carry mummy pills with him at all times, just in case he required a boost in more ways than one. Still not feeling disgusted? Very well. Some medieval love spells instructed individuals to incorporate semen, menstrual blood, or pubic hair into food and present it to their beloved. The belief was that consuming someone's bodily fluids would bind their soul to yours, for nothing epitomizes romance quite like a cursed meat pie filled with blood and hair. And you thought Tinder dates were perilous. However, the reality was that, during that era, love was not merely an emotion. It was a perilous force. To exert control over it, one had to combat fire with fire, or in this instance, mummies and body parts. If you have persevered this far, congratulations. You are officially braver than 99% of medieval lovers. We have discussed sex magic, cursed meat pies, and powdered mummies. But what occurs when things go awry in the bedroom? In the Middle Ages, they had one solution. Witches. Yes, witches. They were accused of stealing penises and keeping them as pets. No, this is not a jest, nor a metaphor. Actual medieval men believed that witches were out there pilfering penises and preserving them in jars. Allow me to elaborate. During the peak of Europe's witch hysteria, particularly from the 15th to the 17th centuries, there was a widespread belief that witches had the power to curse a man, causing him to lose his genitals without any physical removal. Even more alarming was the notion that witches could make a penis vanish through magic. A particularly infamous book, the Malus Maleficarum, which served as a medieval guide on identifying and torturing witches, recounted the tale of a man who insisted that a witch had stolen his penis and hidden it in a bird's nest. When he confronted her, she supposedly led him to a box, opened it, and revealed several living penises writhing like worms, consuming oats and corn. Indeed, you heard correctly, a box filled with penises being fed. This bizarre account was regarded as scientific evidence by the Church. Furthermore, this was not merely an odd myth, it was referenced during witch trials. Men suffering from erectile dysfunction or performance anxiety would appear in court and assert, "A witch has stolen my penis." The frightening reality was that people believed these claims. Some women faced execution due to such accusations, condemned because a man was unable to perform. Viewed through a contemporary perspective, it is clear that these instances were simply cases of erectile dysfunction, performance anxiety, or common human awkwardness. However, during that era, the explanation had to be witchcraft, as it was unthinkable for a man to admit that it was merely nerves or perhaps a lack of foreplay. Instead, it was far simpler to declare, "She cursed me, and now my penis resides in a box," consuming grain. And you thought ghosting was the worst of it. This belief system was not solely rooted in fear. It also served as a means to control women's sexuality. Strong, independent women, midwives, herbalists, were often labeled as witches if a man found them too challenging to handle. Suddenly, his impotence became her offense. You have navigated through tales of nun brothels, powdered mummies, and penis-stealing witches. But believe me, we have reserved the most outrageous for last. While commoners were warned that engaging in premarital sex would lead them to damnation, some kings were constructing erotic pleasure palaces funded by the church. Indeed, prepare yourself that I consumed the church-funded royal sex palaces. This topic remains largely unaddressed. Envision this, a grand stone castle encircled by verdant gardens, gilded statues, and concealed underground passages. However, rather than housing war rooms or treasuries, it is populated with orgy chambers, sensory playgrounds, and nude attendants adorned with perfume. It resembles a scene from Eyes Wide Shut, does it not? Welcome to the court of Aon, France, in the early 1300s. Here lies the astonishing twist, this was not a royal scandal. This was the stronghold of the Catholic Church. During the period known as the Avignon Papacy, the popes relocated their base from Rome to southern France. Once they settled in, they indulged excessively. Historical documents indicate that popes and cardinals hosted extravagant sex parties, maintained mistresses, and even fathered numerous illegitimate offspring. One papal advisor noted that the palace corridors echoed with the sounds of __, dancers and the mirth of sin. Yet, the situation becomes even more outrageous. Some popes financed these indulgences using funds acquired from the sale of indulgences, which were essentially payments from peasants attempting to purchase their release from purgatory. Indeed, you heard correctly. A grandmother sacrifices her last coin to redeem her grandfather's soul, while the Pope squanders it on a Venetian courtesan and a luxurious new velvet bed. And if you believe this was merely a singular occurrence, think again. King Edward II of England, the very same individual depicted in Braveheart, constructed a clandestine royal tunnel linking his bedroom to the adjacent noble quarters. This allowed him to clandestinely visit his male lover in the dead of night without detection. Simultaneously, in Bohemia, King Wenceslas IV was infamous for inviting hundreds of prostitutes to his banquets, frequently compelling his guests to witness him engage in sexual acts on stage for their amusement. These were not isolated events. This represented a profound level of systemic hypocrisy. The Church admonished society to fear sexual relations, to punish desires, and to confess every impure thought, all while they were, in fact, financing orgies with the money collected from tithes. It is akin to a local priest declaring that pornography is sinful, only for you to discover that he possesses shares in OnlyFans. This glaring double standard was deeply entrenched, and by the 1400s, much of Europe had become so accustomed to this contradiction that it ceased to be shocking. The impoverished were subjected to shame, while the powerful resided in opulent palaces. The underlying message was clear: sex is not sinful unless it is enjoyed. Thus, the Middle Ages are still often envisioned as an era filled with devout monks, virtuous maidens, and noble knights championing morality. However, let us take a moment to review the reality. Virgins were bundled and compelled to sleep tied together for the sake of chaste courtship. Trials of impotence required men to demonstrate their virility in front of an audience. Monks and nuns operated clandestine brothels under the protection of the Church. Lovers resorted to using human remains as aphrodisiacs. Witches were accused of stealing male genitalia and concealing them in jars. And the populace accepted these beliefs. Meanwhile, kings, popes, and priests financed extravagant sex palaces, funded by the tithes of your grandmother. If this revelation does not alter your perception of the so-called Age of Faith, I am uncertain what will. The reality is that the Middle Ages were not characterized by repression due to the prohibition of sex, they were suppressed due to society's obsession with sex, a fear of it, and a relentless effort to control it. Consequently, this led to a distorted, hypocritical, and frequently absurdly unsettling culture where pleasure and punishment were intertwined. We believe we are so advanced today. However, let us be honest, some of our own obsessions, fears, and double standards are equally peculiar and repressed. Therefore, the next time someone reminisces about the so-called good old days of medieval morality, inquire if they would prefer their penis preserved in a jar alongside oats. Now, I am curious. In 500 years, what will future generations think of us? Which of our contemporary practices, applications, trends, or regulations will appear just as strange, hypocritical, or utterly irrational? Please share your thoughts in the comments, I will be attentive. If this video has shattered your previous understanding of history, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more in-depth explorations into the most bizarre aspects of the past and enable notifications so you do not miss what is forthcoming. Additionally, share this with that one friend who still believes the Middle Ages were solely about purity and prayer. Let us tarnish their innocence as well. Until next time.